Today's episode is sponsored by Midwest Fire. For more than 20 years, Midwest Fire has been manufacturing high-quality tankers, tanker pumpers, and fire rescue vehicles in the United States and Canada. Keeping firefighters safe while enhancing their capabilities is what they do best. To learn more, go to MidwestFire.com.
This is Bert Clark, and you're listening to the SA Matters radio show with Gasaway. The SA Matters mission is simple. They want to help us see the bad things coming in time to avoid bad outcomes.
Hello and welcome to episode 66 of the Situational Awareness Matters radio show. I'm your host, Rich Gasaway. The purpose of this show is to improve situational awareness and decision making for individuals and teams who work in high-risk, high-consequence environments. The SA Matters mission is simple: to help you see the bad things coming in time to avoid bad outcomes. I'm coming to you today from Aberdeen, Maryland, where Dave Dodson and I are together at the Aberdeen Proving Ground presenting Situational Awareness and the Art of Reading Smoke. In this episode, I get a chance to sit down with Dave after the class was done and talk about the Art of Reading Smoke program that he created and the book, The Art of Reading Buildings, that he co-authored to discuss his passion for helping to keep firefighters safe by learning how to read smoke and read buildings. Let's jump into our interview with Dave Dodson.
Reading smoke was almost an accident. It really was an accident. Early in my career, I was a very, very new lieutenant, promoted in my 20s, working for a fire department that was growing very quick, converting from a all-volunteer system to a combination system. So there was a lot of opportunity there, and I worked for a fire chief that encouraged professional development and education and seminar attendance and stuff like that. And so I was very fortunate in that regard. But being a new training officer, being a new safety officer, I soon found out that, one of your jobs is walking around the outside of the building, which for a guy that just loved doing interior work, that was a bit of a setback. But I had a can-do attitude. I can do safety, that kind of stuff. And walking around the outside of the building, I started noticing things that were contrary to the very things I was teaching in academy class. So just from that alone, I was like, okay, we have a separation in what's being taught and what's really happening in fires out there. So that was like planting a seed. Now, being a safety officer, there's a lot of things we got to look at, and so many people fall into the bunker cop trap. I was looking at big picture things, and once again, I was discovering things that were, shall we say, contrary to what I've been taught.
Like what? Give me an example. Just one example.
Great example is sucking and puffing as a warning sign of backdraft. Now, a fire that's going into a ventilation limited mode, as we now know it to be, is the one that sucks and puffs, especially an open door. If the door is wide open and smoke is coming out, you're not going to have a backdraft of that space, right? But if that same open door is puffing and sucking, right, it's not going to backdraft, but it's telling you something deeper is going on with the fire. And it could be struggling for air, and it's struggling to release itself, right? It gets into that embattlement of thermal balance.
All right.
So that's kind of one example.
Yeah.
And then the other thing you couple it with, it's actually something that you hit on in your program, is we're teaching our firefighters to use the sensation of heat to make judgments about their own safety. Yet, even back in the 90s, we were starting to see this trend where more and more people were using hoods, more and more people were buying the higher end aramid fibers, Nomex and Kevlar and all those kinds of things, and yet we're still teaching people to use the sensation of heat. Well, you can see the heat in the smoke, right? And it's something that just started pinging my brain. It's like, man, we're setting people up, right? So that's one of many things. There's a whole list of things that I was discovering, and it's because I had the time on the outside of the building to walk around actual incidents and see these things transpire. So that's planting the seed. But being a safety officer, there was a brand new association started called the Fire Department Safety Officers Association. I was a charter member. My chief encouraged it. Right? As one of the first functions of that association was to get the membership involved. And so I got involved. I got not elected to, but appointed to a board of directors. And at a board meeting, we were like, we have to develop tools. We have to come up with stuff to help safety officers and be a real viable organization. And I said, well, you know what? I put together a quick little class to train the other safety officers in my fire department on the things I do on the outside of the building. And we just created this class called Preparing the Fireground Safety Officer. And we had it test marketed, piloted, if you will, in a couple locations. It was very successful. People were like, wow, that's cool. That's a good class. Very useful stuff. So safety officers marketed it to go around the country and teach. We're into the mid-90s now. And maybe about a half hour of a one-day class, I talked about these smoke things, reading smoke. And it's the first time I was trying to put words to it, the first time that I put together volume, velocity, density, color, which are the 4 attributes of smoke, and it's your understanding of those attributes that help you read it. But like I said, it was a real short segment of a whole day class. The National Fire Academy audited our class and created their own ISO and HSO classes, 2-day field programs out there for safety officers. And in no part of that did they put reading smoke. Well, my one-day class, I was like, you know what? There's so much more we could say about being effective as a safety officer. So I hooked up with a guy named Dave Ross out of Toronto. He was then chief of safety for Toronto. And he's since passed. But David was looking at the one-day curriculum, which he really liked, and was teaching it in-house for his own people. He looked at that and he says, Dodson, you're stupid. I said, what are you talking about? He says, you're sitting on a gold mine and you don't even know it. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He says, that reading smoke thing is super, super powerful. You need to expand that, because you could teach that to any suppression force audience whatsoever. I'm like, I'll give it some thought. And sure enough, I gave it some thought. I was collecting a video at the time, VHS tape from fire buffs, especially strong in the East Coast, and splicing those together to create a training aid to replace all the slides that I had. This is before the laptop and PowerPoint world kind of thing. And I developed it and threw it out there, and the next thing you know, man, it is popular as can be. We're standing room only at FDIC. Requests, like more requests than I can handle, because I was still working shift at the time, and I just didn't have the time to go handle all the requests. And so, like I said, it's kind of an accident. It started as just a little tiny, be sure to read smoke if you're a safety officer. See the big picture, don't see the PPE issues. And the next thing you know, it's super popular. Now, obviously, it was probably a crude message back in the 90s, and it's been polished since. And not to mention the fact that we have to add in modern language that we're getting from UL Labs and NIST and those people. So that's kind of its origin, and now we're on a process of refining it, making it an easier message, and frankly, I want to pass it off. Everybody should be teaching each other reading smoke, because it is such an essential observation skill set that we need to have in place before we make go or no go decisions at a structure fire. So that's kind of its background and how it's grown.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you say that somebody's out there and hasn't had the class, in a short synopsis kind of version, give them an idea of why would they want to take this class? What would they learn in this class? I mean, don't you don't have to do chapter and verse. Just give us the shortened. You'd want to take this class because you'll learn da-da-da-da.
Right. Reading smoke it's a situational awareness skill set. It's your ability to look at smoke and process it in such a way that you can figure out what's going to happen next. Right? We have to predict the future. That's more essential than ever because the rate of change in fire behavior in today's compartmentalized world is so compressed it's unbelievable. So we have to make that judgment, otherwise we're going to get sucker punched. Well, so much of the curriculum we have out there, and I'm not belittling it at all, it's just acknowledging what is. In basic fire academy, we teach people, the fire tetrahedron and the 4 methods of heat transfer and the 5 classifications of fire. And then we teach them this silly thing, the 4 phases of fire growth, which is so outdated it's unbelievable. The 4 phases of fire growth is something that explains an outside fuel-driven fire and not today's compartmentalized fires that we go to. So we have to, when we arrive at a structure fire, make a decision for not what we see now, but what it's going to be like in 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 4 minutes or whenever we can engage, right? And the rapid rate of change that's happening in structure fires today, you got to be on your game and predict what's going to happen next. And I don't know too many fire departments that from parking brake to flowing water can do that in less than 90 seconds. Mm-hmm. Well, 90 seconds in a fire that's going through initial growth, ventilation limited, and explosive growth, that's a long time. A lot can happen. Well, the smoke is telling you that's going to happen, but we're not teaching that. Mm-hmm. It's not part of a fire officer curriculum to meet an NFPA standard. It's not part of Firefighter 1 and 2 stuff formally in those academies. So it becomes a skill set that people need to embrace, make it part of their decision-making world as firefighters and fire officers, and certainly command officers in that regard. So, and I think people are recognizing that, hence the popularity, because it is so empowering. Oh my God. Once you kind of get it, you can look at 4 attributes of smoke, volume, velocity, density, color, crunch that in your head just a little bit within seconds, right? And then understand what the path that fire's on, you're going to make better decisions.
Mm-hmm. I remember I had never heard of you. I'd never heard of the art of reading smoke, and then I went to a conference to present, and there was this on the agenda, and I thought, well, I don't have anything better to do. I'll go sit in and listen to this program. Oh my God, Dave, it changed my life. Not changed my life. That sounds a little too grandiose. It changed how I looked at fire ground management. When I was a new firefighter, what I learned about smoke was get it out of the way so we can put water on the fire, and don't spray your water on smoke because you're wasting water, and set a fan and chase the smoke out, and it's about the flames. And I sat through your class and learned about those 4 characteristics of smoke and how the smoke is the predictor of the future. And this was back before I was doing any of the situational awareness stuff. I was just active duty fire chief, hadn't been in school yet on the PhD or anything. And I went like, where's this guy been? How has his message not found me, or how have I not found his message? Because he just in one, and I think it was a 4-hour class, maybe, fundamentally changed my entire perspective about how to read and anticipate events at a fire. It was that profound for me. I mean, it was just stunning. I mean, and I was a little pissed off that I hadn't learned that along the way I hadn't learned that yet. So how does that happen? And from talking with you subsequently, you and your message had been out there for a while. I just hadn't found it, and it hadn't found me. But when it did find me, it was just so eye-opening for me that flames are important, but smoke is where it's at. The smoke is the predictor of the future.
Absolutely.
And then you talk, and we and during my session today, I called on you to you sat there nice and quiet, and and just smiled and everything. And I called on you to just say one word. And I said, Dave, tell him. And I said, smoke is, and you said? Fuel. What does that mean, smoke is fuel? To kind of unpackage that for a minute.
It's, once again, it's a discovery thing. We know this. We know this intuitively or whatever, as experienced firefighters, not rookie firefighters. As experienced firefighters, we know intuitively that smoke is bad stuff. It really is.
Yeah.
Right? But when you break it down a little bit and add just a little science, we don't want to scare anybody away with science. When you look at it from that point of view, a couple things come to light. Number one, smoke isn't just particulate matter. It's not soot and ash. Smoke is this amazing aggregate. It is so full of all kinds of stuff, many that we can't even pronounce, right? That are in solid form, liquid form, and gaseous form, right? And because of our modern synthetic world, at just a simple little structure fire, we are producing volumes of smoke that we've never seen before. And it's these synthetics that start unwrapping and breaking down and releasing all these minute things, as well as gases, right, into this plume that we call smoke. Right? And if you look at some of those individuals, especially what I call the alpha players, the alpha players are the gases like carbon monoxide, hydrogen cyanide, benzene, and acrolein. You look at the properties of those things, and you're like, holy cow, that would be a hazmat call in any other case. And we would go and do protective measures to keep it from igniting, right? Smoke is extraordinarily explosive, and it's extraordinarily powerful in the amount of energy that it contains should it ignite. Now it's like, okay, what's going to make it ignite? Well, right temperature and right mixture. It's that simple. I mean, it's just a little science, but it's critical science. And that's where smoke as fuel came from. When I got off of volume, velocity, density, color, kind of throwing that out there, I wanted to, when we expanded to a full day class, I wanted to make sure that it was technically accurate, and I invested the time to make sure that I read the fire dynamics books, I read the work of Dr. Jim Quinteri and all the big wigs that were into the rocket science of fire behavior at the time. And it's from all that information that I got that, whoa, smoke really is a powerful fuel package. And you probably shouldn't be swimming through it, and you probably shouldn't be in it when it ignites. Mm-hmm. Just, it's an amazing amount of energy. And then I go back to something that I heard back in 1984 from, at the time, my mentor and now one of my good friends, is Battalion Chief John Mittendorf out of LA. John Mittendorf said this in 1984, and I wrote it down. I still have the class notes. He said, watch the smoke. It's the fire talking to you, and it's telling you the future. And I wrote that down. Now, I didn't go on to tell you how to read smoke. He gave a couple hints. But it's little seeds like that along the way that put this whole package together. And now, more than ever, more than the 80s or 90s, your ability to read smoke is so critical because it is laying the foundation for the rest of your event. Most people, you ask them, where's smoke come from? They say from fire. Well, it's actually, there is smoke coming off of flames, but the heat energy of the flames is heating up things around it that chemically decompose. Pyrolysis is what we call it. And things begin to off-gas. It's most of the smoke at a structure fire is from off-gassing. So when you say, where does smoke come from? Fire is really not the right answer anymore. Most of the smoke at a structure fire is coming from pyrolysis, chemical breakdown due to heat exposure, not being on fire, right? And that creates this amazingly explosive environment too. Why? Because if you have any orange at all, if you have any open flaming, that's fuel reduction. You've actually taken a material and reduced it to byproducts that aren't burnable. But pyrolysis has no fuel reduction at all. You're taking a solid mass piece of thing, whether it's a dishwasher or a lamp or a dresser drawer or bed, you're taking a solid thing and totally breaking apart. It's like putting it in a blender and then throwing it up in the air, just hoping a spark will ignite it.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Smoke is now our problem.
Yeah.
It's not flaming.
I remember learning, and I'm going to ask you a question. When we're not doing anything on a script here, so we're just riffing. And so I'm going to ask you a question that you may not even know the answer to, but it just came to my mind, and it seems to be an interesting concept to explore, so I'm going to ask it. I remember learning in my basic firefighting class that 1 gallon of water, when converted to steam, makes 1,700 gallons of steam. Do you know, or do you have any data about what 1 pound of plastic, when converted to the vaporous form, turns into how many pounds or gallons of vaporized fuel? Because, a pound of plastic it's just a solid fuel mass, but when vaporized would become then a suspended fuel mass floating around.
I'm sure a Steve Kerber or Dan Majkowski, any of those people at NIST, that could probably get us into a science page to figure that out. But what I've heard tossed around is in the legacy era, all the fuels that are around in legacy are cotton and wool and hay and wood and those kinds of things. We're talking, those things would create like 1 volume of smoke. But in the modern environment, right, that same amount of furnishings would create like 2,000 volumes of smoke.
So 2,000 more times the voluminous amount of smoke a la fuel from the modern fabrics, plastics, than the legacy fabrics of natural fibers. Wow, that's pretty.
And that's the power of those chemical chains. Just the makeup of things. What is there, like 40,000 registered plastic names out there or something like that? You can go to a Dow Chemical website and look at some of this history stuff. But these chemical chains are so long and so interwoven, well, heat breaks those down and they start unraveling, and you add all kinds of dynamics that are taking place, and the next thing you know, you have other byproducts, you have raw elements, you have so many things floating around, and they're all fuel.
Just waiting for the right concoction.
So many of them are hydrocarbons.
Yeah.
I mean, they truly are.
Yeah.
I mean, think of just, this is an oversimplification, so if there's any chemists out there, they're going to go ballistic. But this is a way that firefighters can think about it. Think of soot. What is soot? Soot is carbon. What is carbon? The simplest element. It's represented as 1. It's a simple C. What is benzene? C6H6?
I don't know.
So that's like having 6 pieces of soot as well as 6 pieces of hydrogen in the same size material. Which one's going to give off more energy when it ignites? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way to think of it. So in the legacy era, there wasn't that much energy being released over time and over space, right? Today, it's exponentially explosive.
And if you watch these, I know there's this video out there that puts the side-by-side comparison of legacy construction, or I'm sorry, legacy contents versus modern contents. And then they light it up and they got the clock running, and you watch the heat growth and flame spread, and it's a tortoise and a hare kind of race, you know. It's very slow, almost like boring to watch slow versus, oh my God, fast.
Right.
And it's easy to see visually in that video clip the representation of this energy release that you're talking about that's coming off of the modern construction, the pyrolysis and the decomposition, and that turning that into fuel is just it's unforgettable.
The trap is set, and that's a great example. even in that UL Lab test scenario where they did the side-by-side, the modern room was venting out a 7-foot by 7-foot opening for a 10-foot by 10-foot bedroom.
Yeah.
It was releasing energy at a fairly good clip, and still the fire created so much energy that it couldn't all get out, even that great big opening.
Yeah, right.
Which that tells us something about the size of vent holes that we're cutting.
Right.
There's probably no way we can cut a big enough hole for the modern content world fast enough and effective enough to take all the energy out of the building.
Yeah, right.
Add on top of that if you don't have adequate flow path, you don't have a 7-foot by 7-foot opening to vent off heat and energy, then all of that smoke production quickly chokes back the fire. But it doesn't necessarily choke back all the heat. All that heat is still in there and it's causing other things to pyrolyze. So you're creating almost like a pressure bomb of smoke in that compartmentalized area. Then the fire department comes along, opens up the door, right? Nothing happens except a bunch of black smoke comes out. They go in with their charge line into limited visibility situations. They may or may not feel heat, right? But it takes about 90 seconds to 2 minutes for a volume shift to take place. And the next thing you know, something that had the right temperature was just looking for the right air, right now has the right air. And our firefighters are halfway between the door and the room that's trying to exhaust heat. But all the smoke in the building ignites. And what's our point of no return down to? It's down to what, 3 feet or 3 seconds? Right? In other words, your gear is going to protect you in a flash fire for 3 feet or 3 seconds.
Yeah.
So it used to be 10. I mean, we've even whittled that away. So it's just become ridiculous. And I know I've said this, and I don't want to offend anybody, but a lot of our teachings are either overly simplistic or, in many ways, we're setting the firefighters up.
Yeah.
We're setting them up.
Yep.
And kind of something I started saying back in the late 90s is so many firefighters are arbitrarily aggressive. They're aggressive because that's what we've always done. For the modern building and for the modern fire, we need to be intellectually aggressive, and that means get some intel. And the intel has to be your ability to read smoke and your ability to read that building.
Yeah.
And it's those two inputs more than any other that should dictate your design of a solution.
Yeah. Well, what a wonderful segue, as you said, read the smoke and read the buildings. Gee, Dave, what's new on the horizon? What have you been up to lately? I got a feeling you're not just sitting on your patio sipping a glass of wine. You've been up to something, haven't you?
I'm gonna sit on my patio and drink wine for the rest of this year.
What have you been up to?
Rich man, I've been writing full.
Yeah.
A couple things were on my plate, if you will. Some people write bucket lists. Things they want to do before they die. For me, it was always, there's some things about the fire service that really piss me off, right? And that sounds negative. No, that's where I get my motivation. It's like the angry young man syndrome, but now I'm the angry old man. Be that as it may, there are some curriculum issues out there that I always thought kind of missed the mark. Well, I'm not just going to complain about it. I'm going to try to fix it. All right? And one of those areas is the way we teach building, the way we teach building construction. Not that I have a problem with building construction books or the work of Vinnie Dunn or the late Francis Brannigan. I love those guys. They're still mentors to me. But it's our approach to teaching building construction. I mean, they tell us the building is the enemy, and people thump their chest and say, you got to know your enemy and all this kind of stuff. Then we turn right around and tell them there's 5 types of buildings. Give me a break. There's 52 kinds of buildings in America, right? There's not 5. In other words, the way we classify the buildings, the way we look at a building and categorize it, if you will, which gives us our hazards, our strengths, our weaknesses, our fire spread problems, has to fundamentally change. Well, the only way we're going to change that is you got to start at the beginning. And when you start at the beginning, you basically have to rewrite curriculum that flows more like your mind should flow when you arrive at a structure fire. So, To answer your question, for the last 3 years, I've been working with a dear man, John Mittendorf, that's why we're good friends now, to rewrite a building construction book that takes a different approach. It's like you have Brannigan that tells you how buildings are built, you have Vinnie Dunn that tells you how buildings fall apart, but nobody's telling you how to read it on arrival and get to the strengths and weaknesses of that building. What are the problems, tactical problems you're going to have with that building? And that's what we did. So we wrote a book called The Art of Reading Buildings. It came out right at the first of the year, and it was a work of love that was inspired by anger. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And to work, John Mittendorf has forgotten more about buildings than I'll ever know. He was a very good command officer on the streets doing suppression in LA City. And that guy knows buildings of all kinds, of any vintage or whatever. He knows his buildings. Most people know John Mittendorf because he wrote the truck company book that Fire Engineering sells, and that's gone to a second edition. It's considered a bestseller. It's kind of interesting. We're having a conversation at a bar, not he and I, but me and the Seattle boys. Have you talked to the Seattle boys?
Mm-hmm.
Right? We were drinking wine at a bar in Indianapolis, and they asked the same question, Dave, what's next on your plate? Reading Smoke's doing really well. Your safety officer thing did very well. And I'm like, I got to go after building construction. And I said, and they were like, why? And I listed all these things that's wrong with the way we teach it. And they said, well, so why don't you write the book? I said, you guys have been thinking about it, but it's too big of a project, and people don't know me as the building guy. I'm either the safety officer guy or the smoke guy, not the building guy. And they're like, well, who's the building guy? And well, I said, it's always been Brannigan, but he's passed. And then I said, Vinnie Dunn is done, right? He's retired. Is he enjoying himself? And they're like, well, who's the new building construction guy? I said, well, it could be Glenn Corbett. He's a smart guy. He kind of took over Brannigan's book, though, and I don't think he's going to change the format too much. And they're like, well, why don't you write it? I said, but I'm not the building guy. And they asked, who do you think should write it? I said, Mittendorf, in his truck company book, has an entire chapter on reading buildings. And it's very useful. It's packed full of great little visual indicators and all kinds of stuff that help you make better choices. He's the guy that should write it. Well, I didn't know that Mike Gagliano was good friends with Mittendorf. I didn't know that. So about 2 weeks after this conversation, I get a call on my home phone. And so I answer it, which I rarely do at home. I answer it, and it's Mittendorf. He goes, Dave Dodson? I said, yes, sir. He says, it's John Mittendorf. I'm like, first of all, my jaw hits the ground. Because I've never really met him, per se.
Yeah.
And he was always a bigger-than-life figure.
Yeah.
Even though he's really short.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But what a great guy he is. He says, Gagliano says that you said I should write a book. I'm like, yes, sir, I did say that. I'm sorry, kind of thing. He's like, well, I don't have the time. I'm retired, and I'm not into that anymore. Back of my mind, I'm like, man said voice call. Then why the hell are you calling me?
Yeah, right.
So basically,
you called to tell me this?
Yeah. So basically, he says, you should write it. And I said, I'm not the building construction guy. You are. You're known more for that than I am. He says, well, I've been to your 21st century building class. I've been to your safety officer class. You do a good job on predicting collapse and all this kind of stuff. How about we write it together? Boom. I signed right there in my mind. And sure enough, we shopped around a little with publishers, found a publisher that was game, and then we embarked on this 3-year project to rewrite a new fire service building construction book. But it's very practical. Mm-hmm. It's how do you get to making a decision? And the coolest part about this book, and it was like he contributed so much knowledge-wise, I had to contribute something. So I had this idea. What about at the back of the book, we put in those 52 representative buildings, and we'll call them rapid street read guides. It's just a one-pager. On one side of the page of paper is a couple pictures of a building. Then we tell you how to classify this looking building, and we have a formula, if you will. Here's the exterior features, the interior features, the construction that you can expect, it's kind of its strengths and weaknesses, and then you flip the page over, There's all your tactical considerations. Here's your fire spread issues. Here's your ventilation issues. Here's your forcible entry issues. Here's unique hazards that come with that building. So they're like very germane or generic pre-plan that people can use that can match it up to buildings they have in their own district and already have a head start on how a building's going to behave.
Well, now the book's out, but it's relatively new out, right?
Yeah, it's just out this year. So.
Yeah, all right. And have you yet created the corresponding class that goes with the book?
Yeah, while we were writing, John and I started talking about this, and maybe as a way to maybe warm up the fire service, we threw out a half-day hot class for FDIC that we would both teach. And it's basically the art of reading buildings. And we wanted to kind of test the message a little bit. So we designed a half-day class, put it out at FDIC, which thankfully they saw some wisdom in it and allowed us a spot on their crowded program. But we've taught it now 3 times. And the reception has been wonderful. It's motivated us. Some of the comments from the first time we talked made it into the final of the book before I went to the printers. So there's some good feedback we got from that first test pilot. And I probably have 5 classes scheduled on the books in the future of people that are interested and want a class. Of the 5, I think 2 of them are half-day versions and the other 3 are full-day versions of the Art of Reading Buildings class.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good. Well, if somebody wanted to reach you and say, okay, I'm duly inspired for a reading smoke class or a reading buildings class, how do they find you?
Probably the best thing to do is just write me an email.
Okay.
I have been in writing mode. Like I'm just now finishing up on Incident Safety Officer 3rd edition. This is a total rewrite of the very first book I wrote back in the 90s. So I have not been on Facebook. I have not kept up my social communication network. But the only thing that I'm looking at right now is my emails. Mm-hmm. So if people wanted, just write me a personal email.
To where?
And it's Dave Dodson, all one word, Dave Dodson, and that's DaveDodson at Q.com, just the letter Q. So DaveDodson at Q.com is probably the best way to get a hold of me. Good news, bad news. Good news is I am accepting reservations for 2016 classes, but 2015's booked solid. I can't squeeze anything else in this year. Good problem to have, but it sucks for scheduling.
Yeah, exactly. But they can get you scheduled for 2016, and they'll probably be able to. Although the decisions haven't yet been made, I'm sure your class will be at FDIC in 2016 too. So they'll be able to possibly at least get the preview version of the class at FDIC as well.
Hopefully.
And I'm sure it will be. Having written the book for them, right? The Art of Reading Buildings is a Penwell book, so real good chance that message will then get the opportunity to be shared at the conference as well. Dave, thanks for taking some time to sit down with me and to share your motivation, your passion, your inspiration for both reading smoke and reading buildings.
Well, Rich, it's been a pleasure, and thank you so much for the invitation. And keep doing what you're doing out there. You're helping get the message out.
Oh, thank you.
And I appreciate that opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave Dodson, for sharing your passion with our listeners today and for helping us to understand the importance of reading smoke and reading buildings. Before I close today's episode, I want to take a moment to thank the departments and the organizations that have hosted recent Situational Awareness Matters tour stops. Your efforts to bring this valuable and powerful training on situational awareness and high-risk, high-consequence decision-making to your members and others in your region are greatly appreciated. The Ohio Fire Chiefs Association in Columbus, Ohio, the Norristown Fire Department in Norristown, Pennsylvania, the NSA Conference in Washington, D.C., the West Point Military Academy at West Point, New York, and the Aberdeen Proving Ground, where I am now with Dave Dodson. If you're interested in joining me for an upcoming program, on August 3rd to 7th, I'll be in Gary, Indiana. August 8th, Wadesville, Indiana Fire Department. August 10 to 14, Crawfordsville, Indiana. August 17 to 21, I'll be doing a ride-along with the United States Forest Service and the McCall Smoke Jumpers out of McCall, Idaho. If you're in that region, we could hook up. August 26 to 28th at Fire Rescue International in Atlanta, Georgia. If you're interested in attending an upcoming Situational Awareness Matters tour stop, head over to the SA Matters website and click on the blue box on the right side of the homepage labeled Upcoming Events Schedule. Here's hoping there's a tour stop near you and we'll get a chance to meet up. If you're not a member yet, consider joining the SA Matters community of learners. There are more than 5,000 members connected here on SA Matters, sharing ideas about how to improve situational awareness, how to make better decisions under stress, how to train members to be critical thinkers and resilient problem solvers. Membership is free, and when you sign up, I'll send you a special report that I've created for the new members called 25 Best Practices for Improving First Responder Safety. If you're not a member yet, head over to the SAMatters.com website and click on the red box on the right side of the homepage that says Free Membership. As a reminder, every episode of the SA Matters radio show has a corresponding show notes page on the SA Matters website. The most recent episodes scroll on the homepage. For the older episodes, go to SAMatters.com / and enter the episode number, which is always mentioned at the start of each show. So, for example, if you're interested in accessing episodes, say 50, open up your internet browser, enter www.samatters.com / 50, and that'll take you to the show notes page for that episode. The show notes page contains additional information and resources about the episode, and depending on who the guest is and what they provide, there may be incident scene photos, videos, and audio, and contact information for the guest. On the show notes page, you can also leave me questions and leave your feedback on the episode. If you want to get connected with me on social media, you can follow @Rich Gasaway or @SA Matters on Twitter. The SA Matters Twitter community is more than 15,000 members strong, and thank you for all of those who are following me on Twitter and for supporting my mission there. You can also get connected with me on Facebook by liking the SA Matters page. On LinkedIn, you can find me by searching Rich Gasaway on LinkedIn. And thanks to everybody who are connected with me on Facebook and LinkedIn. I surely enjoy sharing the SA Matters mission and content with you there as well. Well, that's it. Episode 66 is complete. Thank you to our guest, Dave Dodson. Thank you to our sponsor, Midwest Fire. And thank you, our listeners, for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I really appreciate your support of the SA Matters mission. If you've experienced or witnessed a near miss or close call and would like to have a platform to share your lessons learned with others, please contact me by visiting the SAMatters.com site and clicking on the Contact Us link on the top of the homepage. Have you ever thought about this? That your lessons learned from your close call could save someone else's life? Think about that for a moment. And if you want a platform to share your experiences and lessons learned, contact me. If you like the show, please consider going over to iTunes or Stitcher Radio and subscribing. Search for SA Matters Radio, SA Matters Radio. Please consider leaving me some feedback while you're there, and if you like the show, I'd appreciate it if you'd give it a 5-star review. Not only will that motivate me to work even harder for you, but it'll also help others to find the show. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters radio show with Dr. Richard B. Gasaway. If you are interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit SAMatters.com. If you are interested in booking Dr. Gasaway for an upcoming event, visit his personal website at richgasaway.com.